how'd you get into writing science fiction?
I grew up on it. My mother was, she had lots of books, but she was also had a kind of a taste for fantasy, although not solely. In other words, she wasn't a fantasy nut or anything, but she had, I was mentioning to somebody, or another group, I guess, that there was this writer called Robert Chambers, whom some of you people may have heard of. He was writing romances about the turn of the century, but he also wrote fantasies, modest fantasies, with the boy and the girl lynching at the end. But there was a Maker of the Moons, which had, at that time I read it, just had a marvelous atmosphere. And then there was something called King in Yellow, A Tracer of Lost Persons, and I can't think of any others, but I read these Robert Chamber books when I was 8 or 9, I guess. And my mother also had Edgar Rice Burroughs books there, Tarzan, Barsoom books, and grew up on those. Then there was a writer, well, I mentioned the Edward Stratomayor stable. He was a fiction factory, and he generated all these series of boys' books, girls' books too. Namely, well, I won't read them all out, but one of these books, in the pseudonym is Roy Rockwood. And this Roy Rockwood, I think, produced earliest things you could call science fiction that I know of. If you want to discount H.G. Wells and Jules Verne, which you may or may not call science fiction, I suppose you can't hardly resist it in case of Wells. Although Verne, I think, kind of hard to call his stuff science fiction. He like was more engineering fiction or something. But anyway, be that as it may, Roy Rockwood wrote. The first one was called Through Space to Mars, where the professor built a spaceship in his garage, and the two boys, and the thing was propelled by a sophisticated system of radio waves, or not radio waves, but waves moving back and forth in the hull and gripping on the ether, whatever it was, and throwing the vehicle through space. There they landed on Mars, and they encountered a native race who was not at all friendly, but they had sticks. They could point at the Earthlings and make them move forward or move back through the force of radium. And I forget how they evaded these things, but they eventually escaped and ran back to the spaceship, hurtled off back to Earth, and that was the first book, Through Space to Mars. Is what called Lost in the Moon, and to the Center of the Earth, which was the precursor of Burroughs' Pellucidar, and then another one which dealt with a satellite like the moon revolving around the Earth at rather low altitude, inhabited by little dwarf-like creatures that wore sandals with slits in their soles of the feet in which they grasped knives. They were very dangerous little critters. But these are good books. They're imaginative and got my brain ticking over for sure. And I read those, and I read everything else I could think of. I read everything the library had, from aspidistras to zygotes out of the library there. I was at that time, I had, it seems arrogant, at that time I was a very bright kid, or I guess I was bright, I was obnoxious no doubt, but but I had the notion that I was going to assimilate all of human knowledge at that age. And at that time, when I was growing up, there wasn't all that much human knowledge. And I read all the history there was, and I assimilated that. Read Isaac Newton's physics and whatever, I forget what there was in astrophysics, which wasn't a hell of a lot. Nobody knew very much about the stars. I forget. But anyway, I figured and it's true. I had an excellent education, and I knew certainly more than all of these people in the neighborhood there who were farmers and ran dairies and things like that. And of course, I was kind of a, unique kid, I guess. But anyway, I went to high school, got out early, and then I took myself in hand. I said, Jack, you've been a weasel long enough. Now's the time to change. So I went out, and this time we didn't have any money, we were broke. And but I left home. I went out, and I went into every kind of work I could think of. I picked fruit, and worked in cannery. And I got a little later, I got a job in construction, mining construction, and I worked there for quite a bit. I worked at gold, what they call well, it's a thing that sucks, takes mud out of the river bottoms. And the hopper. Yeah, dredge, but the whole setup is called something else. There's a dredge, but it does make a difference. I worked there as an oiler, night oiler, and on that thing. I worked on a prospect rig, which we had to take this thing down into the bottom of a valley, this drill rig, which we did by dint of rigging and careful getting it down, and then start getting dirt up from the floor of the valley and then assaying it. To do this, we had to bring in water through flume from whales to Elliott. But anyway, we did that, and sank these shafts until finally the drill rig just wouldn't get any deeper. The soil was too compacted. The claws of the bucket wouldn't grab up any more soil. So that was that. We had to leave that job. Then I got a job in San Francisco as a bellhop at the Olympic Club, which is the most terrible job I ever had. I hated it. But I was there for 8 months, I guess. Got a motorcycle and got a sailboat, a little sailboat. And then, they fired me at last. And I said, I'm going to go to school. But my whole theory was I was trying to get some money together so I could go to Cal, but I couldn't accumulate enough money. They didn't pay me anything to speak of. So I said, well, I'll go anyway. So I started Cal, and I got a small scholarship and did some, and worked in the fraternity, doing that kind of stuff. And I managed to survive without too many luxuries, and stayed there for a year and a half, and I got restless. I got good grades, all A's actually. I majored in physics to begin with, but then after a couple of weeks, I looked around at these people who majored in physics along with me, and they didn't seem very not adventurous exactly, but didn't seem to have much color to them. They're all very intense on their work. And they didn't laugh very much, and they didn't, their eyes were dull, and their hair was turning gray. I don't know. I don't think I want to grow up in this community. So eventually I became a journalism major. And then I went to work in Daily Cal, where I hung out all the rest of the time. But I took off after a year and a half, and I got a job with over in Pearl Harbor with the Navy. I managed to convince them I was an electrician, owing to what I'd learned at this mining construction business up in the hills. So I was over in Pearl Harbor as an electrician, not a full electrician, but electrician number 2 or number 1 or something like that, some designation. So the first thing they did was, well, Vance, what's your specialty? What do you want to do? So I looked around and said, I saw some of the things. I said, well, I'd like to work on the instrument because we're inside and out of the heat. So they put me to work working on gyroscopes and meters. And I didn't know anything more about gyroscopes than I knew about anything, but I fumbled with them around, did this, did that. So finally, the boss, named Pangborn, decided that I really wasn't doing very much good, transferred me to the plating shop, where I learned to electroplate metals. First you pickle them, then you coat them with copper, iron at least. You give it a dose of copper, then chrome, nickel, and then chrome. The chrome acts as puts a layer on just a few molecules thick, just as a protective coating over the nickel. So I was there for a while, and finally they sent me out to the worst job of all, which I've been dreading, which was that they're going through this project of degaussing, which means stopping the magnetism of all these holes. So there I was down the bottom of these holes, sitting there pulling cables through these holes, sweating profusely. Oh, what a terrible job it was. I did this too much. And I came back to the States. I don't know how I saved enough money. To this day, I don't know how I got the money to do so. But I came back on the last voyage of the Matsonia. And I got home about December, early November, I guess. And I'd hardly been home before the Japs bombed the place. And so that was, I just escaped there by the skin of my teeth. I'd probably been there yet. But anyway, that was, I went to work in the Kaiser shipbuilding, building Liberty ships. I was a rigger. I learned to be a rigger, a pretty good rigger. Still am, as far as I know. But anyway, that's not how I got to write science fiction. But I was, I think yesterday I told this story about being in an English class and this, the instructor wanting us to put in some kind of, every week we'd have to submit some kind of something we'd written. And so I had this clever notion. Well, I'll write a science fiction story every week, submit it and get a good grade, and then try to sell the story. So the first time I did this, I wrote this short 6,000 word story, submitted it, and a friend of mine, Don Faven, who was ultimately became house editor for Kaiser Permanente, wonderful typography. He's produced this marvelous magazine, which is now a collector's item. What was this?
No, it's somebody talking outside.
Oh, well anyway, turned in a little anecdote about going to a prize fight, turning it in. So the instructor's name was George Ham, and he came up and he said, in front of the class, he said, wow, this week, I've had a wonderful panoply of material come in. It ranges from a marvelous little piece about a prize fight where you can actually feel it punching, feel the tension in the air. Ranges from this really fine piece of work to a science fiction. So anyway, that's that. But actually, I did write a science fiction story when I was still in the Daily Cal. Kind of a long kind of a thing that never sold. But anyway, that's the end of it. Thanks, everybody.